Hey, my name is Shilpa Patel and I'm obsessed with all things career development. I am a pharmacist turned entrepreneur who's transformed my passions into purpose. I've grown a podcast that has reached thousands of people across the globe. I'm building an online business and I've left my 9-to-5 to chase my dreams. I've walked this path of transformation myself, and now I'm here to share insights, strategies, and stories to help you carve out a career that you love. Career opportunities, personal development, challenges, growth, and building life skills are all things we discuss on this podcast. Be prepared to be inspired and motivated to step outside of your comfort zone. This is the Pharmacist Diaries podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Pharmacist Diaries, guys. I am super excited for another 3-part series, but this time I am with my friend and my colleague within pharmacy, Shilpa Patel. Some of you may know Shilpa through LinkedIn because she's so active within the community. She was originally a community pharmacist by background, but then she transitioned into a GP practice and is now also a GP practice partner. So I'm really excited to share this episode and talk to you all about the things that she's learned within her journey, building a team of pharmacists within the GP practice, and sharing with you common interview questions and how you can actually make that transition if you were interested in doing so. Today's the first episode of a 3-part series, and today we're going to learn a little bit about Shilpa's background, but we're also going to talk about common interview questions and some tips if you were considering the transition to a GP practice. And this doesn't actually mean that you come from a community pharmacy. It could be a hospital, it could be industry. So we're going to talk a lot about transferable skills. I'm really excited to share these episodes with you, and let's dive on into it. So welcome to the episode, Shilpa. I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. And I love that you called me a friend, because I feel like we've become friends now over the last few months.
Virtual friends turned face-to-face friends.
First time we're meeting each other.
I know.
Yeah.
And it feels so many moons ago that we actually recorded our original episode, which is your full story, which was a really popular episode, especially because a lot of pharmacists out there do want to transition from community to GP practice. And so that resonated with a lot of the community. So that was really exciting. But because you're well known within the pharmacy community, it was also a popular episode because people wanted to hear more about who you are. I will link that into the show notes so that people can watch it if they haven't seen it already. But today we're doing a 3-part series. The episodes will come out every sort of few days when they do arrive. So, watch this space. If you're watching this episode, the second episode and third episode will be out sort of within 4 days of each other, which I'm really excited about to keep the momentum going, because normally I do every week, right? But I'm going to put these together a little bit closer because I think it'll be really exciting for people to have that content. But I wanted to focus on your story today, just to give people awareness of who you are in case they don't know you, but also to dive into that transition piece. It's a massive part of your journey and your career as a pharmacist. Not only have you done it yourself, you're helping other people to do that transition as well. And you're highlighting the importance and the value of all these transferable skills when you're coming from other sectors of pharmacy, and how important they are in understanding the entire kind of career piece and having that portfolio career as well. So tell us a little bit about your journey to begin with, and then we'll kind of dive into that transferable skill piece.
So I'm really, I love talking about this because it gives me a chance to reflect on kind of the journey I've been on. And as you know, I like to share it. I talk about it a lot on LinkedIn because I'm finding that a lot of people are in the situation that I was right in the beginning. If I start kind of right from the beginning, I'm from Norway, which a lot of people don't know. But I came to Brighton to study at Brighton Uni. And my parents are Indian. I'm from East Africa originally. And I noticed, I've learned over the last few years that a lot of pharmacists have become pharmacists because their parents kind of wanted them to. And I was one of those. I kind of just became a pharmacist because it was something that would please my parents. I think it was something I just, wanted to do for them. And it took me quite a while to actually find my feet and to actually start enjoying the job. So I think in the beginning, I wasn't really looking for a purpose within pharmacy. I used to you could make quite a bit of money in the beginning. It was a really good profession to be in. And I kind of just went on this kind of journey of, buying a house, getting married, having kids. And pharmacy worked really well for me during those years because whilst my children were young, I could work 3 days a week. I could work evenings, which suited really well, with my husband. And then I think I suddenly got to a point where I thought, I need more than this. I need more than just kind of going to work, fulfilling my duties. And I think a lot of people kind of are in that situation where they haven't quite found their purpose. And I think that's where people really relate to the things that I talk about. One of the big moments was obviously when I walked out of community pharmacy, which I think I shared with you on the podcast a couple of years ago. That was probably the first time I spoke about it, and I had a lot of interest around that. But I genuinely did. I just had enough one day at lunchtime, and I decided to just walk out. I mean, obviously there was a long story behind that, but it got me to a point, and nobody should have to be at that point where they just suddenly can't take it anymore. I was a really hardworking pharmacist. I was putting as much effort as I possibly could into it. I was hitting all the targets. I was doing everything, going way beyond what I was even expected to do. But I got to a point where the toxicity just got to me and I just couldn't do it anymore. So I walked out and I didn't have a clue what I would do next. But I was probably in a position, I'd been a community pharmacist for 15 years. So I was in a position where financially I was kind of okay. Wasn't too sure, I still had a massive mortgage and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I knew I had to work, but I wasn't struggling as such. But that was a huge turning point for me because I suddenly decided to just take a step back, really reflect and think, what can I do next? Whatever I do next, I don't want to be doing something that doesn't give me that fulfillment. I didn't have a clue what that would be. And at the time, I mean, this was 8 years ago, there wasn't that many opportunities. There wasn't GP pharmacists, there wasn't PCN pharmacists. It was all brand new. And I was really, really lucky that I think it was about 2 weeks after I walked out, NHS England announced that they were going to fund pharmacists to get into general practice. And that is pretty much what changed my life. I didn't really have a lot to lose, so I went for the interview. There was 400 people who went for the interview in Brighton. And coming from community pharmacy, I never thought I'd stand a chance. We always have this thing as community pharmacists, we feel like, we're not clinical. We've forgotten our clinical skills. I felt like, I'd been doing it for 15 years and I didn't really feel confident at all when I went for the interview. And I just went because I didn't have a job and I had nothing better to do. So I kind of just went for the interview. Hadn't written up a CV for many, many years. Quickly kind of typed one up. And went for the interview, got the job. It was great because the guy who was interviewing me absolutely loved me, and I really feel his name's Gary. He was a practice manager at a surgery at the time. He actually told me a little secret a few months later. He said he loved my haircut and that's why he gave me the job.
My goodness, did he? He took a chance on your hair.
I reckon I was probably really chilled as well because I'd come out of this really toxic environment. I'd spent a couple of weeks in the sun just at home, but, really, I was probably very relaxed and I didn't think I was going to get the job. But I walked in looking very confident, he said, and I'd had a brand new haircut at the time. So my hairdresser's really proud of that as well.
That is so funny. Well, I mean, it's opened up doors and given you opportunities that you have changed your life, like you said. And that's really an incredible part of your journey. It's an incredible part of your story, and also what you share so much about through social media. And you are supporting other pharmacists to break out of that cycle, to break away from that toxicity that they sometimes feel in community pharmacy. And you know, I don't want to be negative about community pharmacy. It might not be the experience for everyone, but for you specifically, you were well aware that the environment that you were in was toxic for your health and well-being and your mental health. And there are times in life where it's like, enough is enough, and you need to break away from that. And for you to quit on your lunch break is quite an extreme thing to do. And as a pharmacist, normally we wouldn't be so kind of like bold and outrageous and be like, I'm done, I quit. Like, I can't even imagine you doing it. But you did it, and your environment must have impacted your mental health to the point where you had to break free and just be like, I'm done and I need to move on. And that is a really brave kind of element of your journey, and it showcases a lot about who you are and where you've come from. And I love that you've included the words purpose and the words value in our conversation, because this is really important, is that when you find a job, you may not always know why you're doing it in the early stages of your career. All of us sometimes in the early stages of being a pharmacist take the first opportunity that comes our way, but we don't necessarily know that that's the job of our dreams, or that's, you know, going to be the best option for us. Sometimes it's a stepping stone. Sometimes you need to just gain the experience. Sometimes you just take the first job that's offered to you and you just roll with it and see what happens. But you lasted 15 odd years in that role, not thinking, I'm not enjoying this. How do I break away from it? And you obviously reached an extreme sensational feeling that, or emotion, that then was like, no, I have to find another way to enjoy my job. And that does kind of come down to purpose. When you're working in a community pharmacy, it's so busy. You are nonstop on your feet all day. You're a checking machine a lot of the time. You're dealing with queries. You're solving problems. You're constantly on the phone. You've got your staff to deal with. You potentially have upset and frustrated customers when there are supply issues, or prescriptions are not ready, or they're too slow. There's a lot of negativity for us as community pharmacists when you're in that environment day to day. And I think that can really be a burden on people's mental health on a day-to-day basis, and they can reach that point like you did. But I'm so happy that you did make that bold decision, because look at all the things that you've achieved since then. And you've literally flown in terms of your career, and you've learnt so much in the last 8 years of the journey, and you've literally, sped up this huge mountain of success, and something to be really proud of. And it's inspiring for a lot of people who, like me, are following you through LinkedIn and enjoying your story. And because you share a lot of your success within the GP practice, including reviews from patients, which are really exciting. It's really nice for us to see that and be part of that, even though it's virtual. But still, it does feel like a community for us, doesn't it? I guess tell us a little bit about when you got the job. Mm-hmm. What were your kind of thought processes in terms of the skills that you had from community pharmacy, and what you thought you might be using in terms of those skills and qualities when you transitioned into the role? Because you probably didn't know that much about what the role was actually going to entail, because it was so new. Tell us a little bit about those transferable skills in terms of what you thought you would use. And now, 8 years into the journey, what are the actual attributes of a good GP practice pharmacist that you'd like to see when you interview people or you read applications?
You've taken me right back to my first day. I remember sitting with Gary, and he kind of asked me,
As a pharmacist, I know firsthand how challenging it can be to maintain our health and well-being whilst caring for others. I am a true believer of making the time to look after my physical, mental and emotional health, and I love the idea of using natural supplements to support me on this journey. That's why I was so excited to find The Naked Pharmacy. Their products are 100% plant-based and naturally sourced, 100% biodegradable, and it feels really safe to know that they are formulated, tested and manufactured to the same standard as a pharmaceutical product. However, the most important fact to share is that their CEO and founder, Kevin Levers, is a pharmacist with over 35 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry. I love that as a community, we can support our pharmacy colleague every time that we purchase a product. As a Pharmacist Diaries listener, you get an exclusive 20% discount off all Naked Pharmacy products using the code PD20. Just visit www.thenakedpharmacy.com and treat yourself to something new.
So, what are you going to do for us? And I was like, what do you want me to do for you? I didn't have a clue how a GP practice works. I really didn't know what I was going in for. And I always say, you know, I took a big risk. And I think a lot of people who joined during that first pilot stage, we were all kind of risk takers, and the practice managers were as well. And even now, going forward, you know, more and more GP practices are taking pharmacists on. And there is that risk element because you don't really know whether the pharmacist is going to fit in, whether you're going to fit into a GP practice. So it is quite a risky business in the beginning. But I do think a lot of community pharmacists are risk takers, or they've built this kind of resilience over the years. I definitely feel very resilient. You know, sometimes I get thrown things at me and I kind of just say, well, I've worked in community pharmacy. You can throw anything at me. You know, nothing kind of phases me. And I always feel like, not in a bad way, but community pharmacy actually made me such a strong person, to the point where when we look for a new pharmacist now, I mean, there's probably two reasons for this, but I always look in community pharmacy. One is that I've got a lot of community pharmacy friends, but what I've found is that community pharmacists work really well in GP practices. And one of the reasons is because they're very resilient, and they can multitask. You can throw anything at them. They kind of come into the GP practice and they kind of think, oh, this is really easy. This is really simple. You know, kind of the day-to-day, the targets, the processes, all of that. It's quite easy for a community pharmacist because we're so used to having to have multitasked and done so much in one day. And you come in and, you know, you're allowed a tea break and you're allowed to kind of actually take it easy. I suppose the bit that's quite scary for people is the clinical side. And I was really scared of that. And it was quite difficult in the beginning, because I remember right in the beginning, one of the first couple of weeks, a doctor came in to my room and went, oh, we've got a pharmacist here. Can you quickly talk me through how to switch someone from pregabalin to gabapentin? And I actually didn't have a clue. You know, I knew what the box looked like. I knew what strengths they came in. I kind of knew how to, because that's what I'd been doing for many years, stuck the label on the box. And I really didn't know what to answer her. And I remember that day thinking, I never want to feel like that again. I never want to not be able to answer a question when a doctor's giving you that respect and asking you about a medication. And since then, I have looked back and thought, well, that wasn't my speciality. I had already done the prescribing course, but it was nowhere near those kind of medications. But I just felt this kind of urge to just learn loads. And for the first time, I started reading up loads and I started studying all over again, 15 years after I'd qualified. And I learned so much in those first 2 years. But it was because I wanted to learn it. I wanted to be able to answer any question that any doctor posed to me. And I wanted to be able to do the best for my patients. So I kind of threw myself into it all. And I set up my benzo detox clinic. So I had to learn all about benzodiazepines, addiction, how, withdrawal symptoms, how best to get people off the benzos. So I started kind of throwing myself into all these different clinical areas that I hadn't worked in previously, and I needed to learn them inside out. And so I did for about 2 years. And I always say that to any pharmacist who joins us, first couple of years, you do need to learn a lot. I suppose the difference is that 8 years ago when I came into general practice, there wasn't any other pharmacists there, so I kind of had to learn everything myself. Now there is kind of more of a support network. Any pharmacist that joins our practice, on the first day, the first conversation I have with them is, I have no expectations clinically. I don't expect you to know anything before you come in, but I have taken you on because of your personality, and that's how I pick people now. I make sure they've got the right work ethic. They need to be able to fit into our team because we're quite a big team of pharmacists now. They need to have that resilience. And if they're able to, I can teach them clinical skills, but I can't change their personality. So whenever I've got 10 pharmacists working in our practice now, which I'm very proud of. And I shout about that quite a lot, but and I think we've only got 6 doctors, so there's more pharmacists than doctors in our surgery, which is something to be really, really proud of. And that's because I've kind of set up a really nice pathway for the pharmacists. They come in, we use the Rs fundings to kind of get them in, and then they go through this whole kind of pathway where they learn a little bit of every topic, and then they kind of specialize in whatever they are interested in. So when the pharmacists first come to us, they're kind of in my situation where I was 8 years ago. And because I've been there, I can relate to them. I make them feel very comfortable, I think, in the beginning. And I had one of my pharmacists said the other day, openly on social media, that he felt when he came to our practice, he felt listened to, and he felt he said something about it's the feeling that they get when they're working with us. They just feel really good, and it's how I make them feel rather than kind of what I do for them or so it's really important to understand or make them feel like I understand that they aren't an expert. When you go to a new job, you're not an expert in that field. And there's sometimes a lot of expectations. And I feel like there kind of was for me as well, because I was in a PCN role. So I was 4 days a week at one surgery and 1 day at another practice. And I ended up leaving the other practice quite early on because the expectations were so high. And, it was a new job for me. I really didn't understand the processes. And it takes quite a while to figure that out, especially when you're on your own. As I say now, things have changed quite a bit because you can get support. Anyone who does join a GP practice, I'd say, reach out to people, even via LinkedIn. Reach out to people who've been through that journey and just learn from each other. And we can teach you the way. We can show you how to get to that.
Well, you've raised multiple great points. I think the resilience piece is really valuable for people to be aware of, that community pharmacists are way stronger than they believe in themselves when it comes to skill set. They have a lot more skills than they genuinely believe that role has given to them or what they've experienced, and they've been in it for multiple years, because you do the same thing over and over every day. It maybe just feels like the standard routine, and that you're not learning because you're doing similar tasks all the time, day in, day out. But actually, if you dive deep and reflect on what you do every day, how you do it, why you do it, what problems you solve, how you communicate, the multitasking piece, the leadership piece, and if you're working in a pharmacy with other people, you have an insane amount of skill The only thing that you might struggle with is the clinical aspect, which I feel most community pharmacists focus like 90% of their fears on the fact that they're not clinical pharmacists and 10% on the fact that they have all these incredible skills. And this is where something like this podcast can raise more awareness of the fact that you have so much more than you give yourselves credit for. And now you've learnt that through going outside of your comfort zone, thinking outside the box and doing something different, that you've then realized in hindsight that actually I've got loads of skills that I can now utilize in a GP practice role, and I can teach other people and share that knowledge and experience with others, which is incredible. When it comes to the clinical skill, like my perspective or my opinion on that is that you can learn it at any time. If you don't feel comfortable or confident in certain areas, pick up a book, look at a website, read nice guidelines, check the BNF. You will always find the information. And even if you're faced in the similar situation you were with a doctor, you've got the foundation, having done a pharmacy degree, to know where to look to find the answers. So don't feel guilty or bad or that you're not good enough because you don't know the answer. Use it as an opportunity to say to yourself, I've learned something new today. I've gone out of my way to support someone and help a doctor. I've helped a patient, but I've also learned something that I can now utilize tomorrow or the following day or the next week or the next month. And that, if you can shift your mindset from that perspective, then you can sell that in an interview. It's exactly what I did. When I applied for my pediatric position at the Evelina, I was applying to a tertiary hospital with pediatric specialists as an 8A pharmacist in a senior role, as well as an academic role within a university, which I hadn't had before. And I had some reservations thinking, am I good enough for this post? I'm really going to try hard to do my best in the interview. But if there are pediatric pharmacists who already have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years experience, of course they're going to get the job over me, because they've got the pediatric experience that hospital 100% would be able to use. But when I applied for that job, I sold my transferable skills to the max. Like, I talked about the fact that I wasn't a clinical specialist in pediatrics, but I am willing to learn. Like, I'm 100% all in when it comes to a new rotation or a new specialist area. And I will learn everything that I need to learn. So it may take me a little bit longer to get to the point where I need to be. Like, I've become a palliative care specialist now, and I didn't know anything about palliative care. That job was kind of given to me by my chief pharmacist because I went from a maternity leave contract to permanent. And she said, hey, we've got funding for palliative care. Would you be interested in doing that for 2 days a week and then doing your academic role? And I was like, yeah, cool, like, let's do it. The consultants were really engaging. They loved pharmacy. They wanted to have us in terms of the value, and they knew how much value we could provide. They knew I didn't have any experience, but they were willing to teach me. They were willing to be patient when it comes to learning and education. And you just have to realize that nothing is perfect when you apply for a job. There's no expectation to have every single criteria filled when you apply for that position. You just have to be able to sell that you will be able to get that to that point, or you need some support to learn about whatever skill or experience it is that you don't have. And I've kind of taken that concept into my work life and built quite an exciting portfolio career for myself. So I'm hoping that obviously if there are community pharmacists or even hospital pharmacists who want to transition to GP land, there's nothing stopping you from doing it, because all you have to do is learn to sell the skills that you do have in a new environment. That's all you need to do. I think one thing that you kind of missed in terms of the skills that would be really valuable is embracing change. That if you're moving to a new environment, whether it's community or hospital to GP, some things are going to be unknown because the role is still relatively new. So embracing change and being and accepting that things aren't always going to go to the policy or the plan, and you have to make amendments and adjustments. There is a difference between working in community pharmacy, where you're mostly having a conversation through the phone. So the communication piece comes into it, doesn't it? And now you've got access to these GPs all around you, which must be really fun. you get to engage with other healthcare professionals, which must be a really fun environment. But also you can learn from each other, which is great. But also when it comes to direct patient care, you've literally got potentially a GP in the door, like in the room next door, and you can just pop your head in and be like, oh, I don't know how to deal with this. Can I get some help? And they would happily support you. So those things kind of come into play. I want to ask you a little bit about the business side of learning about a GP practice, because you even said like you didn't know how a GP practice even runs, right, in the early days of getting this job. What do people need to be aware of, or maybe what do they need to learn about the business side of a GP practice that they won't necessarily have access to as a community pharmacist?
Well, I mean, I was at a meeting once, and one of the partners kind of said, well, pass it over to Shilpa. She's the one with the business degree or the business background, I think he said. And it made me think, I said, I haven't got a business background. What are you talking about? And I realized that whenever I go to conversation, any meetings or anything like that, I'm the one who's constantly thinking about, income, targets, all kind of the business side. And I think that, again, that's come from my community pharmacy background, because we have got business acumen and GPs haven't got that. So very early on, they spotted that in me, and they kind of picked out that, she really, because I'm constantly thinking about how we can improve things, how we can get more funding, how we can kind of utilize all the resources in a better way and make work more efficiently. And I don't feel like any of that was going on before I got to the practice. Every practice is very different. So, whenever you join a practice, it's going to be a very different journey for every single person. I was very lucky in that our GPs, I felt like they really respected me, especially the main GPs. And I'm hearing stories about a lot of pharmacists who go into general practice where they're not being respected, they're not being valued. And I've tried to give people advice over the years, and I kind of feel like it's quite a difficult battle. If you're in a GP practice where they don't see the value of you after you've been there like for a year or so, I'd leave and I'd go to another practice. It's really hard to, as you say, make that change. But I had to do that at the first practice I was at. I wasn't getting what I wanted, and I moved over to another one where I was actually respected and valued, and they saw potential in me, and that's where I was able to fly. Because I didn't want to end up back in that position where I, at some point in community pharmacy, I wasn't feeling respected. And I just felt like, that, and no pharmacist wants to feel like that. So I've given that advice to a lot of pharmacists. I've basically said, you need to leave where you are now, go somewhere else. And hopefully that GP practice will later on realize kind of the potential of pharmacists. I have been talking quite a lot on LinkedIn about kind of tips on how to get past a general practice interview. And one of the main things that I would say is to research the practice before you go there. And it's very easy to research practices. And these are things that I didn't know before I kind of joined general practice. But there's a few websites that you can use to understand what problems a general practice is kind of facing. And if at the interview you are able to identify those problems, they'll be able to relate to it, and you can come up with solutions to it. So one of the things I would say is have a look at their CQC report, which is available to anyone. It should be on their website. So you just have a look for their CQC report. If you click on their CQC rating, it will give the whole report of what they're good at, what improvements they need to make. There's always a whole prescribing side of it. So it's really good to kind of really understand that, because imagine if you're going to an interview and they ask you kind of what your expertise is. And for instance, when I went for my interview, if I'd known that they were one of the highest prescribers of benzodiazepines in the country, and that was a real problem for them, they had been picked up on it. If I had mentioned that and said I was a benzodiazepine expert, I would have got the job. Obviously, that's not what happened for me. But, you know, going forward, that's something that you can utilize. There's also another website called Open Prescribing, and I use that a lot, and that kind of tells you how a general practice's prescribing is, what they're doing well in, what they need to improve in. And I look at that all the time to make sure that we're doing well in all the different prescribing areas. It's to do with costing, but it's also to do with kind of patient care. And I look at kind of our opioid prescribing, our antidepressant prescribing. It compares you to kind of the national average, so you can see where you're doing well and where you need to kind of make improvements. There's also Fingertips, which is another website. So if you spend, you know, an hour or so just doing your homework, really understanding the practice's problems, that will really help you during an interview and to get in there. I've also kind of had, obviously once you join a general practice, there's the CPP pathway, which I went on 8 years ago. It wasn't, it was good then, but it wasn't amazing, but it's really improved over the years. And I feel like it's a real good resource now. So I think, originally only people who'd come in through Rs funding were allowed to join the CPP pathway, but now it's open to all pharmacists who join the pathway. CPP have a introduction to general practice training course as well, which you can do kind of before you even come for the interview. So you get a really good understanding of general practice, and we didn't have that back then. So I do feel like, you know, if we'd had that back then, that would have really have helped me. But go on the CPP pathway, and then you get your prescribing qualification at the end of that as well. That's 18 months. And in our practice, I've been putting together kind of everything that I've learned over the last 8 years. What I actually realized was when we got our first pharmacist in 7 years ago, I then realized I've got a whole year's worth of stuff that I need to teach her. We got a second pharmacist in, and then I suddenly had 2 years worth of stuff that I had to teach her. And you know, it was getting really difficult because I had like piles and piles of like protocols that I had printed off. And so I decided to put it all together in a website, which I have named Ask Shilpa. So it's askshilpa.com. And I've put literally everything that I've learned over the last 8 years. So it's got all the clinical stuff, and it's kind of written from my heart, and it's written with, I use all the guidelines, NICE guidelines, BNF guidelines, local guidelines, national guidelines, but I've also kind of tweaked it with my experience and things that I've learned. And I've written it for pharmacists who are joining general practice. And we're finding that a lot of paramedics are using it now, a lot of advanced nurse practitioners, and I've even got a lot of doctors, junior doctors who are using it. And it's just kind of all the information that you need all in one place. So you're not having to find out kind of what drug you need to use and then go to another resource to find out the dose, and then another one to kind of find out exactly which drug to choose out of those 3 or 4 options. I've kind of put my experience in there as well. So I use that to train all my pharmacists. And it's got to a point now where if they want to learn a new topic, I just say to them, right, today, look at Ask Shilpa on that topic. For example, HRT, or we've started ADHD prescribing. So we've got to kind of quite high levels on there. And they just kind of have all the information in one page. And then, but it's all the information that's relevant to general practice. And I just use that to train them now. And that's open to everyone now. I decided to open it up, I think it was 1.5 years ago. And so lots of pharmacists around the country are using that.
I love that. That is so exciting. And I love that there's a few things that I kind of want to point out is that you mentioned chatting to other people who are GP practice pharmacists. So if you're new to a GP practice, and specifically if you go into a GP practice role and you don't quite enjoy it or see the value, or you're not quite happy, trying to understand why that's happening and not, I guess, making yourself feel bad because it's you. It might actually be the environment that you're in. But understanding why that's happening is really valuable. And one of the best ways to do that is to speak to other people and find out what it's like to work in other GP practices so you can make that comparison. So if this is your first time, your first role, and you don't know any different, then it's really useful to connect with people and find communities of other GP practices or GP practice pharmacists who have been in multiple roles or multiple surgeries, so they know what works well, what are the positive things, what are the impacts that you're making, what are the relationship like for a good GP practice with the doctors, so that you can make that comparison and potentially make that decision to leave if you don't get the value that you're looking for. Because the last thing that you want is to, again, be in that same situation where you feel you don't have the value, you're not respected in the environment that you're in. And I'm sure that there are GP practices out there where GPs aren't quite happy to have us in those roles, and they haven't quite transitioned to the point of accepting that our roles are expanding and we're running clinics and we're deprescribing and we're supporting patients in a similar way to what they would be doing. But then there are practices who love us and they thrive knowing that they have us in that environment. And from the feedback that you're getting from your surgery and what you post on social media, it seems that it's a really happy place to work where you collaborate, you enjoy working together. The GPs have their own sort of cohorts, but you guys have your own specific cohorts and diseases that you deal with as well, which is so exciting. I guess we'll close this first episode by just having a little recap on kind of the key takeaway messages that you would advise any pharmacist who wants to transition into GP practice. What are those kind of like top 2 or 3 things that you would advise them in terms of when they make that decision to transition?
If you are a community pharmacist listening to this and you're thinking of making a move, really take a step back and think about what you actually want from the next job. And I think that's what went really well for me, was that I had it was only a couple of weeks. I had a couple of weeks where I was really reflecting. And I when I think back at that time, it was 2 weeks, really sunny weeks. And I sat in the garden and I used to just think about what is it I want this next role to look like. And I just couldn't see myself being in a community pharmacist. I wanted something drastically different. So really understand what is it you're wanting. And I say the same to people who apply for a job at our practice. I always spend a lot of time trying to get to know them and trying to figure out, is this the right thing for them? I've had 2 pharmacists who actually were very close to joining us, and I talked them out of joining us. I said, this isn't the right time for you. They were very focused on, I had both of them actually were newly married, had just had babies, were the breadwinners, and they kind of, success to them wasn't what success to us is. They wanted to go and make lots of money. And I did say to them, I said, general practice the first stepping stone isn't all about making money. It's more about that work-life balance, feeling really fulfilled. And I said to them, go and make your money and then come back in 5 years' time, And I'm quite truthful with the pharmacists when they come to us, and not having said once you've worked your way up, you can there is a lot of money to be made in general practice, but I don't think that should be your main goal for coming here. So really figure out what it is you want, and then remember that you've got all these skills that we've talked about. You are so resilient. I didn't realize, I'd never heard about transferable skills before I joined general practice. And it's something that I've learned over the last few years, that resilience, the work ethic, our organizational skills. You know, we're constantly organizing things and making sure things are ready at the right time. We're able to look to the future, predict kind of what can go wrong later on. That's really helped me. And I think, just make the most of that and sell it, as you say, sell it to the next job that you go to.
You definitely become a salesperson in these interviews. But I mean, as a community pharmacist, just to kind of summarize, you've talked about all of these skills, but when you work in a community pharmacy, you've got so much knowledge on what stock is available, what products you can get hold of, what formulations you can get hold of, where you get hold of them, and also knowing where to look to find that information, which as a GP practice pharmacist, if you're potentially prescribing, you obviously want to provide a product that you know is readily available in a community pharmacy. So that piece of information is so valuable. Like, I'm a hospital pharmacist. We prescribe items all the time in outpatient pharmacy or through clinics, but then we know the patient has to then collect those items directly from the GP. So it's really important that we then make sure that we can gain access to those so the patient doesn't have problems or come back to us for alternatives. But we don't have access to any systems to really allow us to dive into what suppliers have in community pharmacy and what is readily available or how long it's going to take. Especially with lots of pediatric specials, it can be quite challenging for us. And it's something that we've been working on. But you've got this insane amount of insight from your day-to-day job, which you think is like such a boring thing to like have awareness of. But it is absolutely a skill that you can then utilize in your next role. And it's powerful. It's a massively powerful skill that you can then utilize. Even cost. Everything in the GP practice ends up revolving around cost, but obviously effectiveness as well of the drugs of choice. But cost is a major part. Like, you get involved in the business side and managing money, reducing costs, finding drugs or alternative items that do the same job for the patient but actually cost less. And all of those skills can then be utilized elsewhere, which is just fab. And I love that you've taken this whole new role in your stride and you've just constantly learning, growing, developing as a person, as a professional. And now you've had an opportunity to do so much education and training, which you might not have done on a daily basis in a community pharmacy role, but you've found like your area of expertise, but you've also built new skills that you love and that you found your purpose. And I love that. That makes me so happy, because I found my purpose with podcasting and it's been by chance. And you found this role by chance and you took a step out your comfort zone to apply for it and you didn't exactly know what it would turn out to be. And it's turned out incredible. And you're in a really happy place and you've become a really, really successful, courageous pharmacist. And I'm really excited to end my first episode of this series just showcasing that, because it's really important. So yeah, thanks for joining me for episode 1. For all of you out there, I hope that you really enjoyed that episode. I am really excited to showcase episodes 2 and 3. On the next episode, we will be sharing Shilpa's journey on building a team of pharmacists and focusing on that journey and how she's actually managed it. So make sure that you check out Ask Shilpa. I will share the link to that in the show notes below this episode. And check out the next episode when it comes out soon. All right, see you later.